Hi guys, how's it going?
Man.
I've missed you guys. It feels like it's been since last year that I saw all of you.
Your joke is bad, you should feel bad. Love you.
Alright. I'm going to jump right in here and we're going to start by, I'm going to tell you guys a little story about a small group of islands called Fiji. Does anybody know where Fiji is? Any geography buffs out there? I see hands in the back. Do we know where Fiji is? Yell it out.
It's surrounded by water.
Okay, yes, it's surrounded by water.
Cool.
Alright. Fiji is a small group of islands literally in the middle of nowhere. A kind of a really interesting story about the small group of islands. They did not have television until 1995. Okay, that's like mind-blowing to think that they didn't have television until 1995. In the Fijian culture, it's common practice to have large groups of people get together and entertain and basically have big parties on a regular basis. And it's considered insulting not to eat to the point of being gorged at these get-togethers. For that, plus a number of other different reasons, the normal kind of body image of men and women in Fiji is round, I guess would be the best way of putting that. There's a picture I have of some of these Fijian people. And it's not horrible, but they're definitely, compared to our standards, more on the round side. In 1995, they did a survey of 65 teenagers between the ages of 16 and 17 years old. So they found 65 teenagers that were 16 and 17 years old, and they asked them a whole bunch of questions about their perception of their bodies, their body image, what they looked like, all of those different things. 3% of those people surveyed said that they had issues with the way they looked or how they were perceived. They went back in 1998. Okay, now remember, 1995 is when they first got television. They went back in 1998 and did the same survey again with a different group of people, but still 65, 16, and 17-year-olds. So the same demographic. They didn't ask the exact same people, but people in the same demographic. 15% admitted to having eating disorders, and 69% admitted to dieting and trying to impact how they looked. All of a sudden, young girls were dreaming of looking like movie stars from Melrose Place or 90210, instead of looking like their mothers or their aunts. And there's studies about this whole part of the world. Actually, in the 1980s, there was a huge increase in adolescent suicides in Micronesia as Western culture kind of came in and those influences came in. Now, the point of this message tonight is not going to be to talk about, body image and that kind of stuff. I think that's something in our culture that you guys have probably heard some of those discussions. There's discussions out there about which movie stars have been photoshopped and all that kind of stuff. That's not the point of tonight's message. What we are talking about, however, is how are we affected by what we put in, the information that we're exposed to, and what we put in, how does that affect our thought process, how we feel about the world around us? The prevalence of media in our lives has drastically changed how we interact with the world. In colonial times, a house was centered around a fireplace to keep warm. The fear was being cold, so they were centered around the fireplace. Today, we center ourselves in our living rooms around a television or a computer for fear of being disconnected from the rest of the world. American culture values connection and intimacy above everything else. And because of this, as a culture, I think one of our greatest fears is being alone. We feel like we always have to remain connected and up to date about what's going on. That's not necessarily always a bad thing. This actually just came up this past week in my life. One of my college roommates, his mother passed away. And it was all over Facebook, and they put out some really nice messages. All the details about the service and everything was on there. 10 years ago, if something like that happened, one of my friends would have called me and said, hey, did you hear what happened? This is when the service is, are you going or not? We don't even do that anymore. We just kind of assume that you're connected into the world through these various outlets, whether it be watching the news, being on Facebook. It's just kind of assumed that you're a part of that exchange of information. And again, in some cases that can aid relationships and how we communicate. In some cases, not necessarily so. Big companies spend millions of dollars on trying to figure out what demographic you fit in and how they can reach you. According to recent studies, the average American takes in about 3,500 to 5,000 marketing messages per day. Okay, that's every little blurb that you're exposed to. When you guys are playing on your apps on your phone, all those little things that come up, those are all little marketing messages, and they spend lots of money to try and expose you to the things that they want you to buy or they want you to think. The average American also spends 41 hours per week using technologies such as cell phones, TV, video games, music, and the internet. Now, in the example of this culture, obviously, they were drastically affected by being exposed to just watching TV that had images of Western women and their perception of what beauty is. I think it's kind of naive of us to not think that what we're exposed to affects how we think about different things. We're spending so much time engaged in this mediated reality and less time engaged with each other face to face. And experts and people who study all this social stuff, they're kind of only at the beginning of understanding how this is ultimately going to affect our culture and how it impacts love, relationships, all those things in the long term. They can kind of show you how it affects, maybe a relationship in a specific instance, but how are relationships affected in the long term by this information that we share with each other? The question we're asking is, how do you navigate these uncharted waters and discern what real healthy marriages, friendships, family dynamics, romantic relationships, what do all of these look like with this prevalence of media in our lives? We're very connected to the movies, films that we see, and they become such an integral part of our childhood and our lives. How often do we talk about these things? It seems like it's a normal topic of conversation to ask somebody, hey, did you see this movie? Or if you know someone else likes the same TV show as you, hey, did you see this new episode last week? It's just become something that's part of our normal society. And I think it's important to think about our beliefs as Christians apart from these media influences. This week, what we're specifically going to look at, and we're going to go through this series over the next couple weeks and kind of break it down into different types of relationships. But specifically what we want to look at this week is family dynamics and family structures and how the media shapes our opinion of them. There's a lot of reality shows and movies. We're constantly being exposed to examples of how other families interact with each other. Maybe even more so than in the past with reality shows that I would argue aren't necessarily reality. Is the media's portrayal of families accurate? Is it positive? Is it negative? That's some of the things we're going to talk about tonight. A couple examples that I have of families that would be in the media. And you guys could probably come up with millions of other examples. And just hearing some of the reactions, just seeing some of these families all of a sudden puts an image in your head of how they interact with each other. I actually have a little video clip that illustrates one of these things too. And I don't know, it's just amazing to me that something like this is considered good television, I guess, but here we go. The sad thing was, and I believe at least once, Michelle walked over while I was preparing this message and said, "What are you watching?" Because I probably had to watch, no joke, like 30 clips from this show to find one that didn't have them calling each other words that I didn't want to put up there tonight. And the kids to the parents and the siblings to each other. You know, and this is something that millions of people are exposed to. And I'm sure for some people, that's their reality at home. And they see that and say, hey, look, I'm not the only person that's like that. It's become kind of the norm in Hollywood for couples to choose to have children together without being married. You know, they get to a certain age and decide, hey, I want a baby, let's have a baby. And maybe they get married later and maybe they choose not to. That's kind of become socially accepted. A majority of reality shows portray families that are at the high end of middle class or up. Or a lot of them show families that are at the bottom end of the poverty scale. And I would argue that a lot of those, it's almost in a mocking type sense. No one wants to see a reality show of an average family that's, you know, just struggling to take care of their kids or get by. I guess that's not entertaining, I don't know. There's more and more TV shows about middle-aged people that are choosing not to have families until later in life and choosing to just kind of embrace this lifestyle of, you know, partying and kicking back and not really worrying about those kinds of things. You look at shows like Big Bang Theory, How I Met Your Mother, which I love those shows. But you could argue that dynamic, even back to the Friends days, it was kind of, you know, my career and doing lots of fun things is more important than necessarily having a family. Even Disney movies that try to promote good values have been criticized for their portrayal of love, relationships, families, and how a lot of these things actually work in our society. There was a study that was done at Colorado State University. It was published in the American Journal of Family Therapy, and they did this study about statistics in Disney movies. It's actually really fascinating, and if anybody is really interested, you can come to me afterwards. I can probably give you the information on where to find it. But what they did is they took 26 of the most popular classic Disney movies. So they left out some of the ones that maybe didn't do as well or weren't as, you know, big of a deal. And they broke them down into different categories and basically created statistics off of them. And what they found is that there was 4 themes prevalent throughout these Disney movies. First one, that family relationships are a strong priority, which, I mean, that's a good thing. I think Disney had good intentions. It's not like they were purposely trying to portray a bad situation. Number 2, that families are diverse, but that the diversity is often simplified. We were talking about this beforehand, kind of a running joke that, you know, Disney loves to kill off parents and make it like it's no big deal. Or in some cases, don't even mention one of the parents at all, like what happened, don't even bring it up. Number 3, that fathers are often elevated while mothers are usually marginalized. And the last one, that couple relationships are created by love at first sight, and that romantic relationships are easily maintained and, basically don't require any work. In 61.5% of the families in Disney movies, they're non-traditional. It's not a mother and a father and children. It's one parent, it's, you know, adopted, it's no parents. And this is the one that's kind of staggering, and I think we'll probably touch on this in later weeks. But 82% of the couples in these Disney movies met through love at first sight and portrayed love as easy. That's kind of a theme, I guess, in all Disney movies. I guess, the question is, okay, what does all this mean? And we're going to talk a little bit more in our team time in a second about, what media things are you guys exposed to? Like I said before, 41 hours a week, you're exposing yourselves to a lot of stuff. And I think it's very important for us to actually look at what that stuff is. I think it's kind of ridiculous to expect a lot of people to just totally turn that off and try and not be exposed to it at all. The question is, can you have those influences in your life but be aware of what they are and be aware of maybe how your value structure differs from those things that you're exposing yourself to? So we're going to talk a little bit in team time here about some of the different media things that you're exposed to and maybe what some of these characteristics exist in those. So go find your team. What are some of the common themes that you guys came up with that you saw in some of the different media stuff? Who's got one? Well, you guys are gonna... What are some of the common themes? What things did you see that were prevalent in like multiple different examples as far as how families interacted or were portrayed?
It's either of the extremes. It's either like too good or super raunchy. So you've got like the Brady Bunch, where it's just like, dude, nobody does that. And then you have like Family Guy, and you're like, why is there a talking dog?
Okay, yeah, that's a good one. I think one of the other ones I heard was that in a lot of these shows, the father is always portrayed as like this bumbling idiot. It's the Homer Simpson or the Family Guy, or even shows like Malcolm in the Middle or some of the families on Modern Family. That the dad is always one who's he comes in for comic relief, but he's not really involved in what's going on. That was one of the common things. Any other ones?
The parents are usually separated, either by death or otherwise.
Okay. A lot of them had parents that were separated, yes. Anything else? I know up here they were talking about how a lot of the shows and stuff that a group of friends kind of got together and became a family. And for a lot of people, even church becomes your family. You look at the How I Met Your Mother or Big Bang Theories or even Friends, and a lot of times there's weird family dynamics with the actual family, but as a group of friends, they kind of come together to deal with that. I guess the next question that I have for you guys is, what does the Bible say about how we're supposed to treat each other in our families? I mean, if we're exposed to 41 hours a week of all of this media and all of this stuff, don't we think it's kind of important to know what it's supposed to look like so we can put it in perspective? I think for a lot of people, we don't even bother to take the time to figure out what it's supposed to look like, and what we're exposed to kind of becomes our reality. There's a whole bunch of verses, and we could probably talk for the next month about that, but I had a couple good examples that I came up with. First one is from 1 Timothy, and it says, "If anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." Families have a responsibility to each other. Hopefully you have this example in your families where you have loving parents and families that provide for your needs. And I would argue that that's not necessarily just financial. A lot of the examples, even the Keeping Up with the Kardashians example that I had, I think a lot of youth have this opinion that their families are just there to meet their needs. And I think it goes both ways, too. as a nuclear family, you have a responsibility to contribute and to help each other. The next one that I found is from Deuteronomy. I said deuter. Inside joke. It says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on your doorposts of your house and on your gates." Your parents have a responsibility to teach you about the Bible, about Jesus, about what the commands are. I think this verse kind of, it makes the entire Bible kind of the responsibility of your parents to teach you. When it says teach the commands, there's a responsibility to teach you how to react in different situations, what those commands mean. Hopefully you guys are getting this at home. If you're not, I think it's something that's very important, and it's important that you get that instruction somewhere. Again, the whole point of this series is we're exposed to all this different stuff, and hopefully you have a system of checks and balances. So when you see something on TV or you read something on your phone or on the internet, you have a differing perspective that kind of, allows you to see that big picture. There's stories on the news all the time about, the kid that decides he's going to go shoot up the place because he played violent video games. There's plenty of good Christians in this room that I know go home and play those same violent video games. What's the difference? You guys have something that puts it in perspective. And then I got one more verse for you. It's from Joshua, and it says, "Now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Make it a priority not to serve other gods or idols. We've talked earlier this year about how anything that you idolize can become a god in your life. And the 3,500 to 5,000 marketing messages that you're exposed to every day are trying to get you to make something else an idol. Don't let it happen. You guys have the choice to choose who's going to be that person that you serve in your life. The band can start making their way back up here. We got one more song for you. We're going to continue in the next couple weeks to talk about influences in the media as far as romantic relationships, which I'm kind of glad I didn't have to go down that road. Usually I put my foot in my mouth when I talk about that stuff, and so I just pray that as you guys go back into your routines, a lot of you have been off school, and as you go back into your schools, and as you go back into your normal routine, and you become more exposed to those different things that are out there, that you can at least take a step back and say, okay, I kind of understand a little bit better what my beliefs are. If you guys would just pray with me, and then we got one more song. Lord, thank you so much for just allowing us all to come here each week. Thank you for letting us talk about these things and having the freedom to be able to do that. Lord, we just ask that you help make it in our lives that your word is the number one priority, that your word is what influences us the most, and not all that other garbage that's out there. Lord, we thank you so much for this band and their awesome talents, and just pray that you bless us with a good week. In your name, amen.